rod and his staff. We went through the Red Sea. We got to safety. And what happened to the bad guys? They sunk underneath the Red Sea. You're right. So now God has seen them over, and they're making their way to a land called the Promised Land. Now the reason the land is called the Promised Land is because God made Abraham. Remember that old guy who was 100 years old when he had a son? He was obedient to God, and God said, Abraham, I make you a promise. I'm going to give you a promised land, and that's going to be the land of Israel. And he said, you're going to have so many children, and it will be like the stars in the sky. Now, guess what? Abraham had one son. His name was Isaac. Isaac had 2 sons. Remember the hairy twin and the trickster? Jacob had 12 sons. And guess what? Now there's 3 million Israelites. So God was true. He said, I'm going to give you so many sons, Abraham, and it'll be like the stars in the sky. And so now the people of Israel are like 3 million people. And God is saying, I'm going to lead you back. I took you out of Egypt, that horrible, terrible place, Egypt, and I'm bringing you now to the new land. But you're going to go on a journey. You're going to go on a journey, and you're going to have to learn to obey me and to trust me. And so he said, I'm going to lead you by a cloud during the day. And so all the people were walking, and they were headed to their new land. Well, guess what? It's only been 30 days. So 30 days, that's not very long, it's a month. 30 days have passed since they saw that awesome miracle of the water. It's been 30 days, and guess what? They're out of food. They've run out of food. And so you'd think that they would think, wow, our God is so amazing. He's up there leading us by a cloud. We're out of food, but we don't need to worry because God said be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. He's going to be with us no matter where we go. God can provide our food. We just saw him part the Red Sea. Do you think that's what they did? No. They started to complain. So they started saying, Moses, they're always blaming poor Moses. Moses, you brought us out here in the middle of the desert. We have no food. We're going to starve. Oh, I remember the good old days in Egypt where we were now had big pots of meat and everything was wonderful. Now, was everything wonderful in Egypt? No. But right now they're camped in a place called the Wilderness of Sin. They're in the space called the Wilderness of Sin. And guess why? It's called that because they're about to get yucky in their heart. Because instead of trusting God, they're whining and complaining. And guess what? Jesus is up there and he's hearing them all complaining. And they're not trusting him. They're saying, oh, we loved it in Egypt. Things were great in Egypt. We should have just stayed there, Moses. We had great things. And the Lord comes up to Moses and he says, Moses, I'm going to do something. I've heard the people's complaint. So when we're moaning and complaining, guess what? Who's listening? Jesus. It's making him sad. And so he tells them, Moses, I'm going to do something for the people. I'm about to literally rain down bread from heaven. He goes, but I'm going to test the people because this is what I want them to do. He said, I'm going to give them bread every day, but I want them to get a jar. Every person gets their own jar, and they get enough for that day. Just their daily amount. Tell them, don't store it overnight because it's not going to be good. Don't store it overnight. Only your daily bread. He said, do that for 6 days. On the 6th day, he said, tell them to get enough for 2 days because on the 7th day, there's not going to be any bread. I want them to rest. So he said, go tell the people that. So Moses went up to the people and he said, Jesus said to get close. Jesus said to come close. So all the people got close and Jesus moved the cloud and he got in front of the people and the people saw the glory, his glory up there in the clouds. And so the people were listening. And Moses said, this is what Jesus is saying. He said, he's going to rain down. He's heard your complaining. He's heard your moaning and groaning. He said he's going to give you birds at night so you can have some meat. He goes, but he's going to give you heaven's food. He's going to rain down bread every morning. But this is the rule. Only get enough for the day. Don't store it overnight. Do the 6 days. On the 6th day, get enough for 2 days. Because on the 7th day, there's not going to be any. And so the people are like, oh, we got that. We can follow the rules. So, sure enough, when they woke up the next morning, they saw something floating out of the sky. Whoa. It was dew. because God is so good, he did not want their food to get dirty. So on the dew was this little bread item. And so the people went out and they looked and then they said, what is it? What is it? Well, in Hebrew, what is it is manna. That's what the word manna means. Manna means what is it? So they're like, manna, what is it? And so they tasted it, they got up and they got some. They said, ooh, it tastes like honey. It tastes like honey wafers. And so the people went and they collected the jars. Well, there's always rule breakers. So not everybody followed the rules. Some of the people, they got it, and they kept it overnight. Now what did God say? He said, don't keep it overnight. Just enough for the day. But there were some people that didn't trust, because this is what would happen. When the sun, they would go get their jar, and then when everybody had gotten their jar, God would have it melt away. So some people were worried that if they didn't keep it overnight, what if God didn't keep his promises? What if the next day there was no food? So some of the people didn't trust and they kept it overnight. They were like, I'm just going to keep it overnight because what if tomorrow God doesn't provide and then I'm not going to have any food to eat? So they kept it overnight. Well, guess what happened when they woke up the next morning? In the jar they had kept overnight was bugs and worms. Ew! And guess what? When they smelled it, it stunk. It stunk. And so God was saying, I told you, do not keep it overnight. Only enough for that day. And so, on day 6, Moses said, don't forget. God said, get enough for 2 days because, and you can keep it overnight. On the 6th day, you guys can keep it overnight. Because on the 7th day, there's not going to be any manna. On the 7th day is going to be called the Sabbath day. It's a day of rest. He goes, I want my people to rest because you're going to be on a long journey. I want you guys to be different than everybody else. On day 7, I don't want you to go out and get. You'll have enough from the day before. Rest. Hang out with your family. Rest. It's called my Sabbath day. Well, there's always the rule breakers. So, what did some of the people do on day 7? They snuck out and they looked for the manna. And there was none, because what did God say? On day 7, there's no food. I told you guys, on day 7, I want you to rest. And so Jesus was not really happy. So he tells Moses, when he saw that the people had snuck out, he said, how long are the people not going to trust me? How long? Because remember, he was testing them. And so he said, on day 7, I want you to rest. I want you to focus on me. I want you to hang out with your family. And on day 7, I want you to rest. Because this is what God says. And it's a message for us. When we don't obey God, and we think, well, you know what? I'm just going to disobey a little bit. On day 7, I'm just going to work, and I'm not going to go to church, and I'm not going to, hang out with my family. I'm just going to be all about me, 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 me. Guess what? What happens to all the things we try to do that day? Worms. It turns into worms. It doesn't work out. God says, I want you to keep my Sabbath. I want you to rest and focus on me on day 7. And so that's how God got the people to start to trust him, to start to obey. He provided bread from heaven. So, Jesus is called the bread of life. Did you guys know that? Jesus is called the bread of life. It's another name for him. And Jesus said, I want you, I'm the bread of life. I'm the bread from heaven. I want you guys to eat of me. But, how can I eat you guys like, no. Jesus said, I don't mean literally. He said, read my Bible. This is the bread. This is the bread from heaven. He said, when you read your Bible, you're eating of me, and it's so sweet it tastes like honey. When Miss Yolanda reads her Bible, guess what? God speaks to me. And it's like honey in my tummy. It makes my heart feel so happy. But that's what Jesus said. He said, I'm the bread of heaven. He said, read my word. It's like manna from heaven. And so today in your class, Miss Yolanda got some manna for you. And so you guys can try it. I know there's different food allergies, so you guys can check the box.